That is it for pre-season testing. It has happened. I have some thoughts, so let's speak about it. So first off, Red Bull, they do still seem to be the team to beat. I mean, they were pretty freaking solid this test. How big their advantage is, we're gonna have to wait and see exactly how big it is, you know, but they're definitely still up there as the best team. They had a slight issue on day 2, I believe it was, with Checo, something with the throttle, I think it was, but other than that, they had a pretty flawless test. Their pace seemed to be really good over one lap, over like race pace, long runs, but we'll get into a bit of long run talk later on. But we can't really read into too much, you know, it's testing, but they do still seem to be up there as the team to beat. Red Bull have, by the looks of it, built another rocket ship. They obviously wouldn't have been shown their full hand. They can definitely go a hell of a lot quicker, and like Verstappen's quickest time on day 3 was set on the C3 tires, used C3 tires at that, and was only like 4 tenths or so behind Leclerc's best time, which was on C4s or C5s. So there's definitely a lot more that can be done from Red Bull. They have not shown everything. They have, I think, built another rocket ship, quite frankly, but as I said, you know, how big their advantage is, really, we're gonna have to wait and see on that one. Onwards to Ferrari, they seem like, to me, to be the second quickest at the moment. Like, I don't think there's gonna be much, really, between McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes and that, but I do think Ferrari are the second quickest at the moment. They do seem to, they have improved a lot, from especially from this time last year. Leclerc himself said in the press conference, the pre-season last year was the worst pre-season test he's ever had. But the car seems to be a lot better. The drivers have said it feels a lot better. And it looks like they might have fixed some tire deg issues. I mean, especially on the harder compounds of tires, they were a lot more consistent. They didn't seem to have as much deg as they maybe would have last year. Maybe for once, instead of drawing 25 cards for the Uno deck, Ferrari have actually built a car that doesn't wreck the tires like a cheese grater wrecks the blocks of cheese. Also, yes, if you hear the banging in the background, that's a stone breaker, I think it is. Just ignore it. But no, they look like in a much better place this time now than they did last season. They've definitely made a big step. And Formula Data Analysis tweeted this on day 2. This was Science's race simulation, saying you can't really read into too much of it being quicker, like half a second quicker than the RB19's average race pace from the Bahrain Grand Prix last year, because of course the RB19 in development through the season, and the RB20, as we've established, Red Bull have seemingly built another freaking rocket ship. But according to this, then the race pace on Science's long run averaged about like 1.5 seconds quicker than the SF23. The SF24 is definitely a lot better than the 23. That is very good. As a Ferrari fan, that is very good to see. They did end up having to replace the floor on day 2 after they continued their arguments with freaking drain covers, but I'll get to the drain covers in a minute. Or 10, depending on how long I spend yabbering on. But apart from that, like, it was an issue-free test. It was an issue-free test for Mercedes as well, really, who were the ones that brought up that drain cover initially. But they're looking solid, you know. As I said, I think it's going to be close between them and Ferrari and McLaren, but the drivers seem a lot happier with the car now than they did last year. They seem a lot happier with the W15 than the 14, which is always good to see, you know. No big dramas, that's always good for the teams to have. But I do think they're behind Ferrari, as is the case with McLaren, another team that they're looking pretty decent, you know. They're looking a lot better here than they did in Bahrain last year, which is very good for them, of course, after they developed a lot through last season. They seem to have held that development or continued it throughout the winter break, and they still seem to be up there. A few issues. They had a clutch problem today with Lando, so he lost a lot of running. The car does seem to have a decent amount of speed, but also there does seem to be a couple of niggling issues, just few, as Lavia said on Twitter in our small conversation here, a little bit fragile, kind of, as I pointed out, kind of reminds you of the McLarens of 20 years ago. Quick, but a little bit fragile. But as he pointed out, you know, you can make a fast car more reliable, easier than making a slow, dependable car faster. And it is true, you know, if I personally had to make a choice between a fast and reliable car or a slow, reliable car, I'm taking the fast and reliable car any day. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of who comes out, who's like on top as the season goes on between these teams, how far they are to Red Bull, who, as I said, they're on the Verstappen especially. He seems to be just up there. Some might say he's already got one hand on his 4th world championship. We'll have to see. You know, I don't think he's gonna have as easy a ride of it as he did last year. But a team that has definitely gone down a bit from where they were this time last year is Aston Martin. I don't really know what to say about them. They didn't have any big dramas. They're a bit difficult to place, to be honest. They're relatively up there, but it's difficult to say kind of exactly where they are. They were pretty quiet, but I suppose the quiet test is a good test because it means you had no big dramas. They've definitely lost ground from where they were this time last year, but I mean, they did lose ground throughout the season last year. Interesting to see where they're going to factor into it. Toro Rosso, however, they are looking good. There's been a lot of chat about them. Now taking a lot more parts from Red Bull and that. Fucking Zach Brown, still not happy about that relationship. Either way, they're looking to be right kind of in that getting into that midfield scrap, you know, maybe in there with Alpine. They very well could be challenging for Q3 and points come next weekend, and it's going to be really interesting to see where they factor into all this, because they're getting up there, you know, in with Alpine, who they were just... To be honest, they were just kind of there in this test. I'm going to be honest. They had a pretty much flawless test. They didn't really have any big issues. They added a bit more paint on the nose of the car. And I'm going to be honest, I actually kind of preferred the Alpine without that extra bit of paint. It looks a little bit stupid, but Alpine, you do you. Lap times, well... not great, not terrible, but you know, mileage is more important than lap times, I suppose, and they had a pretty flawless test, no dramas. There was some dramas down at Williams. They had a bit of a stoppage on day 2 with Albon. Sauber had a bit of a stoppage today on day 3. They were in the garage for a while, I think. But other than that, you know, pretty decent tests for them. Haas, they're not looking very quick, but... at the same time, they're looking reliable. You know, they actually did the most mileage of anybody this preseason testing. Like the number of laps Haas did 441 laps in this preseason testing. Ferrari are second with 416. Red Bull third, 391. Sauber and Aston Martin are tying in 4th place on 379. Toro Rosso are in 6th place on 367 laps completed. Mercedes are 7th. 6 laps back on 361. Alpine come in 8th on 334, while McLaren are down on 328 after losing a lot of time today with that clutch problem. Lando Norris losing a lot of running. Then Williams did not break the 300 mark. They're on 299 laps completed. And that's the most important thing for these teams in pre-season testing. It's not really always about the lap times. It's more just like the data they get from the lap times, or from the laps completed rather, and how much mileage they do. The more mileage done, then the more data they can get, the more they can look into and see what's working, what's not working, yada yada yada. We all know this. The teams did lose a bit of time with drain covers though. I can't be the only one who finds it a little bit funny who the driver that initially brought up the drain cover on day 2 was Ferrari's future driver. And the reason why I find it a little bit funny that the first car to run over that was, of course, as I said, a Ferrari. As I saw someone say on Twitter, Leclerc and Hamilton already collaborating on projects. Right, and by the way, a note on Hamilton and Leclerc as future teammates. Right, I'm gonna be honest, they both like music. Leclerc releases music. You know, I have of course listened to the piano songs he's released. They're all very good. I really like them. If Leclerc and Hamilton never do a music collab during their time as teammates, I'm gonna be a little bit disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. Anyway. Drain covers were a little bit of an issue doing it Tornalefen. They're gonna have to make sure that's definitely sorted by the time the action rolls around next weekend for the Grand Prix action, because you don't want something like that happening during the Grand Prix weekend. Good it happened in it shouldn't have happened in the first place, to be honest, probably, but it's a good thing if it did happen, it happened in preseason testing, you know? In terms of long runs, like there was a lot of long runs going on, of course. Red Bull do seem to look the best in terms of long runs. Ferrari aren't looking that bad, nor is Aston Martin, to be fair, on long runs. Piastri's long run from today, from day 3, mediums, he was a little bit behind the others I've just mentioned on the C3s, which will be the soft tires next weekend. Of course, it's C1, 2, and 3 for Bahrain. And I can't imagine they'll do, I can't imagine they'll do more than like somewhere between 10 and 20 laps on the C3s in the Grand Prix, providing they are using them. Normally they are used in the Bahrain Grand Prix, the C3s. The C1 runs, the hard tyre runs. Ferrari looking pretty decent. Red Bull, of course, looking pretty decent as well. McLaren, Aston Martin, Mercedes. Like, you can't really read too much into the long runs, you know, but because we don't know engine modes, we don't know fuel modes. But it's an interesting thing to kind of see. In terms of the pecking order heading into round 1 next weekend, I think it's going to be Red Bull first in the pecking order, Ferrari second, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Toro Rosso, Alpine, Williams, Sauber, Haas. I am waiting for this to age terribly. I'm going to be brutally honest. But no, apart from the drain covers, like there wasn't really any stoppages. So it's overall been a pretty solid pre-season testing. Like, I can't really name exactly one team that's had a terrible pre-season testing. Some of them, it definitely could have gone better, so others it could have gone a lot worse, you know? But, I mean, other than that, like, when it comes down to, like, where teams were now compared to the end of last season, I'd say, like, kind of everyone's pretty much taken a step forward, except for maybe Haas. You know, they've kind of pretty much stayed stagnant, you know, the kind of like the top teams all seem to have taken a step forward. Maybe when you get into more of the midfield, maybe just staying a little bit more stagnant, but everyone's had a decent, it's difficult to tell some teams exactly where they are, but this has been an absolute thought vomit basically of a video, but that's basically what my webcam videos are, you know. If I'm using a camera, then it's basically just my thought vomit videos, and that's just what this has been, you know. Pre-season testing has happened, the cars have been on track, people are still sandbagging, no one's shown their true hand. So it'll be interesting to see how when everyone stops, takes the sandbags off, and actually gets into meaningful lap times next weekend. What do you think the pecking order is going to be heading into next weekend? Who do you think is going to be, we know Red Bull will be first, we know Haas are going to be last. What do you think is going to happen in the middle? What's happening in between that? 2nd to 9th, what's your pecking order? And let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.